What's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well. My name is Lamont. Been a full-time trader for 7 years now, part of the Chart Guys team for more than half of that, where I head up our futures room and our swing report. In this video, we'll go over the overall market, cover some hype market sectors, go over some old trade zones, hit you with some new trade zones, and that's pretty much it. So let's get into it. Just 1 week away, and I kind of forget how to do everything. So let's get into it. All right. So starting off with the overall market spy here, the buyers are fine. The last video that we did, or that I did for the chart guys, was before we left. I think it was something stupid, something silly like the balancing three, buyers never die, right? And it was kind of a joke, but it's not also not right, right? Because although we were still within this big old balance the last time that we spoke, it was still constructive, right? Because the idea was, as long as you're holding over backtest at this prior all-time high, as you've heard me say many times before, well, then obviously higher prices relative to the prior high are being accepted. And so, despite the fact that we were in that forever balance, what felt like a forever balance, you still had to give 1 point to the buyers because they're backtesting these highs. And then also, I was pointing out the fact that within that local balance, let's see, when we had it running as a developing point of control, developing value area and point of control, we were starting to see that, okay, well, at this point now, the buyers were starting to edge out before the breakout because the sellers were not able to respond in kind by testing the developing value area low. So while it was a bit of a joke, there was some truth to it as well. Buyers don't die. You just look at the market, right? You zoom out, look at the market in the long term, and if you had to pick one, perma bull or perma bear, who would you be, right? You should probably be a perma bull if you had to pick one. Obviously, I'm not, but if I had to pick, I would pick bull. And there's a very common saying, right? Never bet against the market long term, because even if you're right, you'll have no one to celebrate with. So basically, if the market is going to trash, you probably have bigger problems to worry about than the stocks. Anyways, so the daily chart looks totally fine for the index right now, for the SPY, I should say. Daily higher low supports at 578.54. And what I really care about now, just like what I was caring about back here during all of this balance, was whether or not these sellers could get back under 565.16, the prior all-time high. That's what I care about now. The new prior all-time high, the high of this last area of demand that buyers have broken out of, 574.71, this becomes our new line in the sand, right? If the buyers can continue to maintain over 574.71, well, then obviously higher prices relative to this local demand zone, which the high of which was the prior record high for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 sessions. Obviously, then higher prices relative to this high are being accepted, which is obviously constructive for buyers. Okay, so even if we lose this short-term support here, 578.54, as long as we're holding over 574.71, then the buyers are doing just fine. And really, as long as we're holding over the point of control of this local demand zone, which is 571.35, buyers are still doing okay. All right, so that's not what happened over here. Obviously, buyers held perfectly over it. They prevented backtest, touching perfect backtest. They didn't touch down on the level. Even if they had, if you recall, what I was saying was, as long as they're holding over 560.79, we would still consider that constructive. So, it's the same, right? There's not a lot of there's no secret, how to view the market. Like, the market is really just a means of distributing goods effectively. In order to distribute goods effectively, it needs to determine fair price to do business. A fair price to do business, at least in the financial markets with these assets, is constantly changing. You look at other things like homes or cars, and the market tends to be more stable. Prices tend to stay more static. Whereas in the financial markets, because there are so many more factors at play, obviously the market needs to do more work to constantly find new areas of fair value. And then very often when prior areas of fair value are established and we leave those areas, then they need to be back tested so the market can be sure that those fair values are still being accepted. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Again, these bars are totally fine as long as holding over 574.71 and 571.35. Moving on to the Qs here. So the Qs, a little bit of relative weakness in the Q, still holding under this, rather the seller was still holding price under this key all-time high supply over here. This all-time high supply point of control is at 496.29. You can see how Thursday's session, we opened up pretty much right on it and then sold off for the rest of the day, which was of course a red flag to have a big old gap just sell off like that. But at the same time, you'll notice that these sellers were unable to get back to the developing value area high of all of this local range. I'm still operating with this as a local range because to me, we're balancing. I see all of this as balance as long as there's not acceptance over this supply or under this demand. So it's a battle between these two structures. And as of right now, you have to give the edge to the buyers for many reasons. One is, okay, well, the buyers have been able to touch the point of control of the key supply. The sellers have not been able to touch the point of control of the key demand. Additionally, this breakout over 487.88, this higher high over here, not negated without acceptance under 487.88. That's another point in favor to the buyers within this local balance. Additionally, a couple of drop-in pops at the developing value area high of this local range means that as long as we are holding over the developing value area high of this local range, then value is building higher relative to all of this balance starting from here. So despite the fact that this is still balanced between these two fellows over here, you have to call for what it is. Within this balance, the buyers are starting to edge out, or they have been edging out ever since they left over the value area high on ever since they broke over the value area, the developing value area high on October 16th, and I've been able to hold above it since then. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the Qs. At this point now, we're still watching the same old thing. Can we find acceptance over 496.29? Doing so would affirm this structure as demand, and then that would be pretty much the best case scenario for buyers. Keep them positioned well for a crack at new highs, 503.52, of course being that all-time high resistance. If we see lower lows, eyes on the development point of control, which really hasn't moved, at 482.90, let's call it. And then if we see lower lows beyond there, eyes on the point of control 474.40. As long as that is holding, then we are being constructive relative to this structure, and then the buyers will then continue to be positioned well to have a go at the all-time high structure. All right, so that's pretty much it for the Qs. Moving on to IWM. So IWM, remember, what we really care about for IWM is really just this guy. This guy made for this major low high over here, made for these major highs over here, made for these major highs over here as well. The point of control of that structure, 217.38, is being, I should say, as long as we're holding over the point of control of that structure at 217.38, then that structure is being affirmed as demand. As long as this structure is being affirmed as demand, well, then obviously these buyers are positioned very well to have a go at the all-time high, right? There's not really that much supply over this structure. You know, if you draw a horizontal line across it, it's just this and this. So it's not really that much supply. Buyers positioned well to have a go at it. And so this is now, let's see, few days into balance and then two inside bars, more or less. I think there was a slight break, but more or less two inside bars. If we do begin daily retracement next week, which the sellers are positioned well to do because we close near the low of the day, and you have now three candle lows that are very close together, if you do happen to take out the low of this session on Monday, the odds of us seeing selling to take out these two lows are pretty good as well, because, you know, think about it, right? These are laggard buyers here, right? Innovative buyers, late adopter buyers, early adopter buyers, late adopter buyers, and then now we're probably looking at laggard buyers because the move is starting to wane. And so laggard buyers, they're more momentum style traders. They might be later in the move. Where are they going to hold their stops? You know, if you're a shorter term operator and you're playing momentum in this session or this session, your stop is under here, you know? Or if you're played on this session, your stop is under here. And if you're really late to the party and for whatever reason initiated a buy near the end of the day on Friday, today, your stop is probably under the low of the day, right? And so if those stops all get triggered, what happens? They all turn to sells, right? And the sell orders then should have these, if that selling comes in next week, should have sellers targeting the value area high of that key structure, which is at roughly 222.28. Holding over 222.28 is pretty much the best case scenario besides holding over the high of the range. It's the next best case scenario. Holding over the value area high of the range means that we're building value higher relative to this structure, okay? And even if the sellers can take out this 222.28 level, the structure is still being affirmed as demand as long as they can hold over 217.38. So buyers looking pretty good here. Anything over 214.60 is going to be good for a daily higher low. I forgot to set you guys up with some trade zones, didn't I? Okay, so for the SPY here, just backtracking a little bit, it's really got to be this, right? Hourly oversold conditions into this local area here of demand is really the only trade in the short term, and it's the only trade that I'm interested in doing as well. I've talked about this in the futures room. Something like this, just looking for balance over this structure. Again, use these zones when there's hourly oversold conditions, just to give yourself a little bit more edge to see if we can get that relief bounce going. Something along these lines, very, very reasonable for SPY. And then for the Qs, you still want to be playing in this area, right? Like, so this is balanced as long as we're looking at these two guys, right? And so if you're a buyer, you want to be looking at something like this. covering yourself, coming into this trade where the volume is greater, where there's more value established in the past over here, looking for buys, even if it's just responsive trade, something like this, very reasonable, looking for a test of all-time high. And then finally, going back to IWM, it's very similar. For IWM, hourly oversold conditions into this area, I think is very reasonable. You probably wouldn't get oversold right at the value area high, but even if we were just looking for like a test of this guy again, get oversold, test this local demand, which is, just essentially this guy down here, right? Breaking over 219.98. If they can maintain that breakout, obviously that's constructive, very similar to the QQQ, where they were able to maintain this breakout, this local breakout over here. We can look for that similar play in the IWM, cover of the point of control as well, and then look for a test like this to try to get to that local resistance. Very reasonable. Hourly oversold conditions in this area makes a whole lot of sense. Moving on to the Dow. So the Dow continues to press higher. We can pretty much move this trade zone up to here. Again, it doesn't have to be complex. It need not be more complicated than this. There are so many setups here some setups in general where they're just simple backtests of prior highs here, right? And I used to worry about giving up the secret sauce, so to speak, but now I realize that there's so much more to trading than just the technical sequencing. So I have no problem giving you the technical sequencing secret sauce, because again, there's a lot more to trading than just understanding technical sequencing. So however, it is a big part of it, right? And so we just always want to make sure that we're setting up our trades in an area where there is the potential for change. And as of right now, there is only the potential for change for sellers if they're able to take out the point of control of this structure here. That's the local demand zone at 421.08. As long as these buyers are holding over 421.08, then they're doing just fine. So what we can continue to do then is just move this trade zone up a little bit higher here, see if we can continue to hold over this high volume area where all of this value was established over here. Let's take this guy from over there. We no longer care about holding that guy so much, and we can extend it down to the highs of this zone as well. And again, we just want to be using these zones whenever there's hourly extension, because we're pretty much always looking for daily pivots in these videos. For targeting, there's really, we're at blue sky breakout, all-time high. So I'm just going to default to the R for the month, I guess, for now, which is all the way up at 44210. I'm curious to see what it looks like for the year. Wow, it's way higher. We're shooting for that R3 now. So I'm going to just stick to the R2, but be a bit more conservative. Oops. Excuse me. Something bothering my nose. Something like that. I think this is very reasonable for the Dow. Okay, daily higher low and higher high. Higher lows support is at 426.92. As long as 421.08 is supportive, then this structure is being affirmed as demand. However, the best case scenario for these buyers would be to hold over 426.20, of course, the high of this local demand zone. Moving on to the dollar. So the dollar popping out of our trade zone here, flirting with the test of the target. This targeting was just based on where the volume picks back up within all of this chop here. If you initiate it down here, at this point now, you should be strongly considering taking out. I'm just realizing how orange I am because my background is all orange. Like jaundiced. Anyway, I'm fine, I think. I don't know. I haven't looked in the mirror in a while. So for all I know, I am jaundiced. Anyway, yeah, so a big old bounce out of our trade zone. At this point now, with this kind of a move, you should definitely be looking to take partials out of your position, take the risk out of the equation, walk your stop up to under this local low over here at 99.865. If you're new around here and you're wondering, gosh, why did we select that as a trade zone? Well, it's just because this structure over here and this structure over here has continued to contain price ever since 2022. Multiple tests of the demand zone, multiple tests of the supply zone, and we're just ping-ponging here. So this is just a very straightforward, responsive trade kind of a setup, right? I do this kind of trade all the time in the futures room for this ring report. It's just a pretty straightforward trade, right? Because the market's going to spend most of its time balancing, because that's what markets are designed to do. The market is designed to distribute goods as effectively as possible, and so in order to do so, it needs to find relatively stable price to do business, right? If price is constantly fluctuating up and down, then people are uncertain. We don't know what the fair price to do business is. But if price is very stable, well, then obviously we have the certainty. People can come and conduct trade, and it's more or less stable, right? It's kind of like a healthy economy. You shouldn't have hyperinflation, right? Prices shouldn't be ripping through all the time, otherwise that causes instability, uncertainty. So and then fewer people can join the market. So That's pretty much it. At this point now, what do these buyers want to do? They want to just continue to maintain over 101.855. As long as they can hold over 101.855, then this breakout is continuing to be affirmed. There is so much space for a daily higher low to be set. Anything over 102.050 is going to be good for one. And for trade zones, you know, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive here, if you don't have any position at all over here, then really you're just looking to get something like this done, right? You're looking to bottom fish off of a backtest of this demand zone. At this point now, this is enough follow through over this structure that I would expect the buyers to look to defend this guy and defend this guy. So if you have no position at all, something like this, in my opinion, makes a whole lot of sense. Something like that. Makes a whole lot of sense. Looking for a higher low play, looking for this area to hold as demand, and then if this area does hold as demand, then the odds of these buyers trying to make their way back up to the other side of this range increases, right? Because again, that's just what's been happening for years now, right? And so that's what traders do. Traders do what works until it doesn't. So that's pretty much it for the dollar. Moving on to the VIX here. And so for the VIX, it's really just trade sideways, you know, as the VIX does, and it is an elevated volatility environment relative to what we were seeing since that October 2023 low, but it is still stabilizing here under 23 and over 15. It's not really that much volatility, you know. That we have spent many years with much higher VIX, so this is still kind of like a low fear or moderate fear environment. If we look at the fear and greed index, I'm sure it's probably pressing greed a little bit, but let's check it out. Oh, it's actually an extreme greed. So can't love that, but as of right now, you know, still just not that much. There's very little fear in the market right now, and volatility is moderate, I would say. Okay, so moving on to NVDA here. NVDA daily higher low and higher high into all-time high breakout. Into all-time high break. That didn't see any follow through. That being said, there is still space over 128.74 to establish a new daily higher low. I am still thinking that we can very likely just be looking at bigger picture balance, especially as we just got this pop and drop over here. The pop and drop occurred after a daily higher low was established, so it's not as if these buyers were running straight into that hot and heavy. You know, so the fact that you didn't get any follow through on that at all is a bit of a red flag. Now, that being said, bigger picture, as long as these buyers are holding over this guy from February, the structure established from February 20th to May 22nd earlier of this year, well then bigger picture, this balance is all very healthy. And I personally would welcome that. I would prefer if we could drill down to the lows, retest this 97-ish level, and then, you know, I would look for another bounce play. If you give me extension into this structure again, I will absolutely be interested in buys here. Okay, that's pretty much it. I'm not going to do a trade zone in here. I don't love this pop and drop here. I see this big old range here. I would prefer to be down here. It's the same thing that I said when we were dealing with price action in here. It looked really great. It looked like buyers were looking to press the issue, but I still was only interested in looking for plays off of this guy. And lo and behold, we did get that test down here, even though I didn't do a good job of capturing. I just sold some puts and like that was it. I was expecting us to spend a little bit more time down here for me to build a position, so I started with those cash secured puts, and of course, you know, those went really well, but you know, not as well as if I just bought some shares. So anyway, that's pretty much it. I'm still holding on to my core position, of course, and that's pretty much it. Excuse me, I feel like I'm getting sick here. Okay, so moving on to Bitcoin here, and Bitcoin, it's still in this forever balance, pretty much backed off perfectly off of this 69,000 level. Again, the 69,000 level is just the prior all-time high here. So I still really just care about this all-time high structure over here. This all-time high structure, the point of control of which is at 61003.36. As long as the point of control of 61003.36 is being supported, then that structure is being affirmed as demand. And as long as the prior all-time high structure is being affirmed as demand, well, then obviously higher prices relative to the prior all-time high are being accepted, right? Which is, of course, good for buyers. So at this point now, this is a good amount of follow-through. And so while I don't really like taking trade in the middle of the range, this is enough follow-through such that if we were to come back and backtest this 61003.36 level, backtest this area, which is what held price over here and over here, I think it's pretty reasonable to be looking for a higher low play, something along these lines over here. Honestly, I would be okay with even operating like this. You can see how this little like two-way trade that was made on this more or less one-way trade up, held price here, significant here, held price here, tries the whole price for sellers over here, and holds a back test of it over here as well. So I would have followed you if you're looking for a test of both this guy and the point of control of that key structure. So something along these lines. I think it's pretty reasonable trying to get back to this guy, because if you continue to hold over this structure, this point, this guy, right? Remember this guy, continuing to hold over this guy should have these buyers trying to look for a test of this all-time high structure here, just like they did over here. Hold the point of control, test it. Hold the point of control, create the structure, hold the point of control, test it, hold this structure's value area high, test it, and then hold it, try to get there, fail, lower lows, no follow through, hold this guy again, test it. You get what I'm saying. So I think it's pretty reasonable to be looking for a setup, something like this for Bitcoin. All right. And I think that might be for a weekly higher low. It would not be for a weekly higher low. Potentially a monthly higher low. So that's pretty much it for Bitcoin. Moving on to Ethereum. So Ethereum, if you recall, we had this setup, this trade zone set up as a top fish. It was something more close to this. And then I suggested after this move down that you take your profits at our target, of course, which I think, oh, actually it's just ever so slightly missed the target, but lots of opportunity to protect your position. And I suggested you walk the stop down, because if you were to higher high from here after coming back down here, then you're probably just looking at further balance. So you don't really want to be looking for more follow through on this sell setup here. That is really it. So it remains to be seen whether or not these buyers can overcome this prior low, 2814.12. They need acceptance over 2814.12 just to negate the change of this breakdown. So all this price action here, all this sideways trade, is really just the buyers trying to negate this breakdown, which as of yet, they haven't done. So despite the fact that they're just trading sideways right now, it is still constructive for sellers, bigger picture, because there is still this big old supply in the way. So even if you do stop out of any remaining position after, if you hit this sell, I still think you can stay frosty for it and look for the potential of these buyers to fail overcoming this structure, fall back down under here, which would then have us expecting more balance such as this. Okay. If you're a buyer with no position, personally, I would be okay with you with waiting for a break of this guy, see some follow through, then look for a back test play off of this low and using all of this local demand as a reference. Alrighty. So that's it. And then moving on to CCJ. So CCJ, this one, just didn't come into the lower trade zone that we had set up here. I'm not fully convinced that it's never going to come back here, because, it does have a history of just very erratic two-way trade, So I'm not fully convinced that we might not come back down here, because of course anything can always happen in the markets. But that being said, this is a very strong move, a very notable move. And at this point now, what these buyers want to do is just like Bitcoin, they want to continue to try to hold over this all-time high structure. You can see how this all-time high structure from back in 07, rejected price over here, and then was problematic for buyers again over here throughout all this price action, etc. You finally clear it, hold back test to the point of control, and then now you've higher high. Lots of space for a higher low to be set over 50.12. Anything over that's going to be good for one. And I think setting up a CCJ, this is a bit of an aggressive setup. This is not something that I would expect to necessarily be for like a multi-year hold or whatever. But for a little bit of an intermediate swing trade, something like this I think makes a lot of sense. Trying to get to the R2 for the year. Something like that I think makes a lot of sense for CCJ. All right. And then finally for MSOs, there's really very little to say about MSOs, because, well, nothing is really happening. MSOs, we still primarily care about this all-time low structure. It's acting as demand. It's come into the trade zone many times and bounced out of it, but it hasn't even gotten to our first initial target here, which is just under 832, this prior low. All of this price action that we've seen ever since May is essentially these buyers trying to negate the breakdown under this 8.32 level. So the fact that they've not been able to do so, obviously not great, but they're continuing to cling on to this lifeline here, this local demand, or rather this all-time high, all-time low demand zone. And so I continue to assert that, this is still a very reasonable trade zone, looking for responsive trade over this guy. As long as you're holding over this guy, these buyers should be trying to make their way back up to at least this fellow. This fellow over here, which is at the bottom of this much larger area of supply, it's kind of like the gateway into all of this supply over here. So if you're going to continue to maintain over this area of demand, well, what should they do? They should be trying to test this area of supply to break back into this big fella over here. So that is really it. At this point now, after seeing so many failures to touch 8.32, if you did initiate in this trade zone, then I would personally suggest taking profits out a little bit under that level, something like this, because the buyers have already proven to you that they are not doing such a great job of tagging it. So that is pretty much it. I didn't prepare any show and tell for this swing report, but if you're interested in getting novel trade ideas sent to your email every single week, and if with live updates to any of the trades that we do take, sent to your email or via our dashboard alerts, then check out the swing report. Links in the description below. Or if you're interested in hanging out with a whole big old group of traders, 1,000 traders, many of which are professional traders who are in here day in and day out. If you want to trade alongside me in the futures room, consider joining our community. It's a great community, super positive, very supportive, lots of educational content, etc. Otherwise, I appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you for sharing some of your time and energy with me. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hope you enjoy the rest of your life. And I hope to see y'all soon. Farewell.